I came to California from Sioux City, Iowa in 1937, and I came to Venice as a A7. They had a B7 and an A7 in 1946. And my folks bought a home up by Santa Monica Airport. It was a brand new section up there, and the street was still dirt. It was a army field or something, because I used to go over and climb on the ropes and stuff that they had. But anyway, I didn't know what high school I was going to go to, and my dad said, I think it's over where that flag is. And I took my bicycle and I went, and it was a nursery over on National. So anyway, I ended up going to Venice High School, found out where it was, and I was a little guy. I mean, I'm kind of big now, but I went there and I took my bicycle in the A7. That was really cool, for about one semester. And then it wasn't cool anymore, so I had to walk. So we walked to school, not in the snow, but we walked. And I had a friend of mine, Phil Shaw, he was there, and we would walk together to school. And then I started to meet some people. For a while, I just kind of hung out by myself. Then I found there was a malt shop at Venice and Walgrove, I think it was. I went in there, and the smoke was so thick, and these guys were so big, and I just looked at everybody, and I said, holy cow, this is where everybody hung out. But that was number one malt shop. There were three of them. Then they moved to I think Beethoven. There was one on one corner called Betty's. A lot of fights would take place out of there. And then Curry's. That was the big one when I graduated in 1951. And all of us went over there for sweater day. We had teal sweatshirts, sweaters, and we were the Algerians. And Dorothy Green was a photographer. She had a shop right there next to Curry's. Nick Nicastro, the shoemaker, he was a fast draw guy or something. Anyway, there must have been 40 of us stood out there, and we got our picture taken. And that picture, everybody sees that picture. It was an amazing thing. In high school, I wasn't a page, but I was an Esquire. And you had to have a B average to be a knight, and I didn't make the knights. And I was a gymnast. And in high school, I graduated, I was about 5'9" and 150 pounds. And I came here tonight, and somebody yelled at me, hey, Pierce, how are you? And it ended up, guy in the audience, Tommy Exanthos, he was also an all-city gymnast from Venice High School, and he was inducted into the Helms Hall of Fame, which a lot of guys from Venice got into that. But I remember Tommy coming to the gym, and I was on parallel bars, and he's kind of walking around. He was from New York, I think. And I started talking to him, and he said, what are these? These are parallel bars. And, well, what do you do on these? So I showed him one trick, and he learned that. And then I showed him another one, and he got that one. Anyway, by the end of the week, he knew everything that I'd done for 2 years. And then he just went from there. He was really great, great athlete, and I'm glad he came all the way from Arizona. He drove here tonight. He saw it on an email and came here. So, and in June will be our high school's 60th anniversary, and we're all having a big thing on June 25th, the day of the Centennial. Dave Bentz, Phil's brother, was in my class. He was also a football player. I see Rosie, I remember her. She was one of the little gals. And yeah, you are. And the Biggers family, right? Kenny Biggers? Yeah, he was kind of one of the big guys like Tom Tolman was. He was one of those, wow, those guys were big. And Venice was just full of sports and dancing crazy. When I went there, we had noon dances. You'd go in the girls' gym, and you paid, I think, a nickel, and they played these records. And that's how we learned to dance. And the girls would teach us, and girls were dancing with girls. Guys never danced with guys, but we would go there. And then we had a sports night, and then a Friday night dance. And then Culver City had a club minor where we would all go, and you would dance. And there were a lot of fights, but nobody kicked anybody or anything else. But it was kind of like, I choose you, whatever that meant. That means you'd be at sports night, and a guy would come up, I choose you. Just, what for? What did I do, So I remember my first fight was a guy named Dickie Griffith, and he was killing everybody. He was a little guy, though. And we went up to Westward Ho Golf Course up on Sawtell, and 3 other guys had to fight, so we all took turns. And Dickie and I fought until we were too tired, and I said, if you quit, I'll quit. And we're hugging together, and he said, okay, so we quit that fight. And then I forgot the other two guys. But anyway, it was just fighting, but it wasn't bad fighting, you know. And then back to Venice High School, they had shops. You know, you had print shops, metal shops, wood shops. Wood shop, I made a hanger. In electric shop, I made a crystal radio. Metal shop, I made this thing. This is 60 years old, and it's a scoop. It's an old scoop you made, and when my mom died, I took a lot of her stuff, and I found this scoop in her sugar bowl, the big sugar bowl. And so I took it, and you know where it is now? It's in my sugar bowl, the big one. But I'm pretty proud of that thing. That thing is 60 years old. Venice, there was a little bit of everything to do. And talking about Boy Scouts, I too am an Eagle Scout. I wear my ring now. I got my ring and Eagle Scout on the stage of Venice High School in June of 1948. And at that time, my wife, who went to Venice High School, was in the audience. Her name was Patty Martin. Some of you know her. Her older sister, Naomi Martin. She went there. And we were married for 51 years, and she passed away about 4 years ago. But when we were dancing, I was cheek to cheek with her. She never got over 4'9", and now I'm 6 foot tall, and I weigh a whole bunch. But Venice High School was just a great place to grow up. You knew somebody because it was a 6-year school. By the time you were in about the 9th or 10th grade, you knew kids below you, and of course all of the big seniors and everything up in front. And that red car, I used to drive that thing. I'd go to Santa Monica. I'd go all the way downtown L.A. My dad worked for the L.A. Examiner, and I'd take it down there. I took my friends down there from high school. And then there were 3 theaters down on Venice. There was the Venice Theater, the Rosemary, and the Dome. And I learned to smoke in the Dome up in the, I think it had a Loge or something up there, but we would smoke these damn Pall Malls. Oh, God, it was. But you had to be smoking and maybe have a little beer now and then. But that was the worst thing. Like Rosie said, there was no dope. I never saw marijuana till I got a job. In fact, I was well, the job I had, I worked right next door in the police department. I was an L.A. policeman for 25 years, and then in that city hall next door, the little building next door, that was the old city hall, and that's where Venice Juvenile was. And every Boy Scout that ever came in, they made me handle him because I was a Boy Scout, and they knew I was doing that. But anyway, Venice, I don't know, I could go on, but I don't want to, and it's getting late. But it served me well, and I'm a member of the Alumni Association. I'm trying to give back a little from what it gave me.
Hi, I'll try and keep it. Do what? Oh, point it toward me. Okay. My name is Al Schaefer, and everybody's covered pretty much of everything. So I'll hit some stuff, and fortunately, you guys can edit this because I'm going to tell you some things that I don't particularly. You know, it's like Facebook. You don't really want these things to come out about your life. I don't ever want my grandkids to hear some of the stuff we can talk about. Anyway, remember the backfield. It was O'Connor, Tolman, Wolfson, and Yowell. Bingo, what a hell of an outfit that was. We used to, I'm going to talk a little bit about the social life. For me, Venice was a bust academically. My fault, all right. I screwed around in class, had a great time. Socially, it was wonderful. And I'm told not to bring, we couldn't have paper, so I've got the Sarah Palin notes here. I had that same apprehension. Jimmy Darling, who lived about 3 doors down from you, and I walked over to Oakwood and California and caught the bus. And we'd heard the stories about they're going to take your pants down and they're going to run your pants up in the flagpole. And we've got visions of us standing there in our skivvies, you know, with looking at our shorts and, you know, just, you know, being embarrassed. Hey, but it worked out all right. We got there, and God, I liked it. I looked around, and I thought, hey, this is all right. They had big girls there. I'd gone to Broadway, and all the little girls. Well, some of the little girls, from Broadway, when they got there, the older guys were checking them out as a future thing. But the big girls, wow, I said, wow, this is good. And because they had, they were all built, and and I really liked that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the girls there, because the girls here didn't tell you about the girls. On a Friday, we had sports night or dances, and it was big hair time. It looked like, in Texas, you can still see that kind of a thing. But this was big hair time. But what they would do is they would get it all up into little pin curls and with those things that you stick in there. I don't know what they yeah, bobby pins and stuff. And then they would put a bandana on, and that meant that you were hot and you were going to go to the dance that night, or you had a date, see. And the skirts they wore at that time came down to about, right about here. And then the girls wore something called, they wore saddle shoes or Mary Janes or something like that. Joyce's, okay. And if you had those, you were cool. They had some bad things. Somewhere along the line, I remember I went to the dance and some idiot came out with a thing called a hoop skirt, which was probably, these guys, I don't know who the hell they're designing for, but it happened to be for me, because these girls had sat down and the hoop, the hoop was up in the air, and it was, I see London, I see France, Then. This is a part I don't particularly want. The brassieres. Oh. The girls at school had these things that looked like ice cream cones, that small dunce hats that came out. And it was interesting for me, but it was, it must have been horribly painful. Okay, let's see. Anyway, when I got to Venice High School, it was in 47 was my first year there. And going to the football games, we'd take crepe paper, and nobody had cars, because you'll never see a 1942 through a 1945 car, because all the car companies were making tanks and Jeeps and stuff. So 46, all of a sudden cars came back. So there were some cars, and then people drove whatever they had. And, you got your parents' car, and everybody only had one car, because we'd had rationing for meat and shoes and sugar and all that kind of stuff because of the war. Well, we got to Venice High School, and the war was over, and all said, hey, the Japanese kids are back, and we've won the war, and we've got a good football team, and we got all these big girls, and and life just couldn't have gotten any better. And they had the dances. I did the pages, I did the Esquires and the Knights, and was in the Reed Cox Boys Choir with this guy. Loved Reed Cox. He was over in a bungalow over in back of the auditorium. My favorite teacher is Reed Cox. He used to go over there between classes over into the ag building and have a snort. And he'd come back, and he just smelled like this cheap whiskey. Mr. Wilson used to keep it in the ag place under some pots, and we all knew where his stash was. And he'd come back, he was a character. We had characters. I'll talk a little bit about the teachers. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I taught school after I retired from the Navy and did some other stuff. And taught school for a while, high school and everything. But the stuff that those teachers did, you couldn't do it right now. Not just couldn't do it. Somebody'd shoot you. Every gym teacher in the back hip pocket carried the sole of a tennis shoe. And they would have a hole drilled in it. And when you screwed around, they'd just come up and just whack you. You said, assume the position, and and whap, and some of them, all of them, Barr, McFarland, Tunney, LaFon was teaching. He was track coach, but Hughes. Now Hughes was a nutcase. Hughes, Hughes had been he had been to the Olympics too for Norway, I think. He was hop, skip, and jump champion or something, and had medaled in the Olympics. But he was just as, I mean, he was out of his gourd. This guy, the other guys that, assumed the position, Hughes would throw it at you. Or I've seen this guy hit somebody with a basketball at about 60 feet, never missed. Or and when we go in the gym, he'd take the gym rope and just go whoomp, and it had the rope was about that big around, and had a big knot on the end of it, and this guy would swing that thing and it would just go crack, and hit some kid. All the shop teachers had paddles. And some with holes in it, not the shillelagh. I'm talking about a straight out, and the only one that I knew that was kind of innocent like that was a guy named Wallace Pershing Harrison. Had a crew cut, had come out of, it was a retired Navy, had been in the Navy as lieutenant commander. It was hard as nails. And what he would do is he would appoint the biggest, nastiest kid in the class as his sergeant of arms, And so when you did something, then, all right, tell Bunky, you're going to, pow. Let's see. When my mother went to Samo High and came out to, used to tell me about when they used to throw tomatoes and eggs, as they would, whoever won the parade, the other team would always win the war, And my dad quit school, started a little market down on Speedway, and then moved to, to Aunt Hannah's place on the corner of Lincoln and Nowita. And then he and his brother sold out to Safeway. And then he had the Safeway down on Venetia in Lincoln. Anyway, so I grew up with all these Venice people and their stories, because my mom, all of her sorority sisters at Samo High married a lot of Venice guys. And so I got to hear all of the stories. And the story was not just Myrna Loy, but there was a guy named Harry Von Zell, who was an announcer for, I don't know, like the Bob Hope radio shows and stuff like that, who was very prominent. And another one of their friends was a guy named Kenny DeLand, who was a director, and he did, one of the Jesus epics. I can't, the Robe, or Greatest Story Ever Told, or something like that. And he had a lot of money. We went up and stayed at his place up at Arrowhead. Let's see. Okay, the music. I think the reason I liked Reed Cox the best is because, well, he taught me to read and transpose music and some things like that. When we went to school, there's a bonding that a number of us have, in that from 1941, starting in 1941, you couldn't get music. We used to play the records. My daughter said, Dad, what's a record? And because all of the vinyl went to the war effort. So at the noon dances where they played records, or at the sports night where they played records, we had the same music from 1941. We grew up with all that music, and that music on the radio from 41 all the way through, I would say, the end of the war, except then there was a guy named Petrillo who had a music strike, and so that was it. Well, my daughter came to me, she said, Dad, she said, have you ever heard of Benny Goodman or Tommy Dorsey? Or I said, you're talking my stuff here. Artie Shaw. She said, well, I really like that music. Can you make me some records? Can you make me a CD? So I have burned CDs and whatnot for them. A lot of Glenn Miller, and actually I've got two eclectic little grandsons who really like that kind of music. My grandsons know who Spike Jones is. Well, there's something about Heil, right in the Fuhrer's face. We used to go like this. I don't know why. Okay, let's see. Venice Short Line. Yeah, we used to take that down to the Chase Hotel, which is where we did our swimming. Venice always had a championship football team. I mean, championship football team, and we just used to just kill everybody in swimming. Let's see. Oh, about your class, Myrtle, I think there was a gal by the name of Toby Hale, or was that your class? She and somebody else at that time, which is like 1947, put together the new alumni song, the new song. You know, we're loyal to you, Venice High School. I don't know what it was before that, but you know, by Blue Pacific waters. Anyhow, I always thank her for that contribution. I saw that she passed away a few years ago. Who else did I want to talk about here? Okay. Oh, yeah, our swimming coach was Ted Nema. Ted Nema was, he looked like a kind of a brunette Pillsbury doughboy. You know, he was, and he had like probably four hairs on his head that he used to wind around, you know, like a turban. He was a sharp dresser, but he always wore. I mean, he you know, as I say, he was a sharp dresser, but he was a real ladies' man. This guy used to take pictures of all the girls, you know. Maybe he had a fondness for ice cream cones or something. I don't know. But today he'd be in the slammer for that probably. Anyway, we'd win when we would win the city championship. We'd win the city championship, and the deal is you throw your coach in the pool. Well, Ted could barely dog paddle, you know. Swimming did some good things for me. I lifeguarded for LA City for 3 years, but swimming never did anything for Ted. And we threw him into the pool, and out comes this guy, and then here's this streak, you know, in back of him, like, you know, this hair, these four hairs that are 18 feet long that he had wound around, you know, around his head. A good guy, and people really liked Ted Nema. Let's see. I guess that's about it. Oh, yeah. The other thing, when I did that thing at the school, they wanted to know stuff kind of like what I'm talking about tonight. I didn't. But we used to ride the Venice Short Line, like down to where the incline goes down in Santa Monica on Wilshire, and it stopped there. Or you'd take it up to L.A. We'd go up to L.A. Mother would take us up there to see the Christmas things. And when I remember going up there to see Alfred Wallenstein at the Philharmonic Auditorium doing Peter the Wolf. Yeah. We lived in a great place at a great time. So many of the friends that I went to school with, high school with, I still have as my dearest friends. And we get together every couple of years or something like that, and mourn severely when some of them pass. But it was, with the exception of the class of 1950, which had kind of a bad break. They all ended up going over to Korea and getting their butt shot off. But the rest of the time, you know, like I said, hey, we got there, the war was over, we were proud, it was, you know, the world was our oyster. The sky was the limit, or for some like Kenny Cunningham in '51, sky wasn't even the limit. He did it in space. I was able to realize my dream, despite the fact that I did academically like Zippo at Venice High School. I found out when I went down through flight training, and they say, and they would come up to me and say, where did you prep? And I say, prep? And I say, you didn't go to prep school? And I went to Venice High School. Oh, yeah. I don't believe I've heard of that. Yeah. But, you know, we felt that we could do anything, and a great number of us did. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with such a distinguished audience.
Thank you and good night. What else is there to say? I mean, crying out loud, this is ridiculous. I was going to start off with being a B7, being the traumatic experience of coming there to the campus, expecting to see my pants hoisted up on the flagpole. I was 4'9", weighed 90 pounds. I thought that would be the thing that would happen. Has anybody ever seen pants on the flagpole? I was just kind of curious. Was that like a giant myth? Was that it? Was just trying to keep you away? Anyway, my class was the last 7th grade class to go a full year at Venice High School before then we had to leave and go to Venice Junior High School, which then became Mark Twain Junior High School, and of course still is. I had gone through Beethoven Elementary School and then made the transition to Venice High School. The things that I remember right off the bat, first of all, having 6 teachers and 6 classes, going from a classroom where you just had one room, stayed in there all day long, and one teacher, you knew who that person was. All of a sudden, you're confronted with 6 teachers and 6 classes, and then all the books that went along with that. I remember I had my first locker. Had no clue how you open a combination lock. Well, you turn 3 this way, and then you turn back past the number, and so on and so forth. And I remember trying to do that so often, and hopefully not be late to class. And I was able to be fairly successful, but I did have that kind of a problem. I remember the boys' gym. It reminded me of Frankenstein's castle. It was really old, and after you would be out on the gym field, then it was your job to rush into the shower and make sure you could get a shower that worked, because most of the shower heads didn't, because you had to be wet when you got out of the shower, or, as someone commented about Ben McFarland, he had a shoe sole, but he called it the Black Widow. And if you weren't wet when you came out of the shower, you then had a red mark on your fanny that was going to last all the rest of the day, because it wasn't any chance. You didn't have a chance to put your clothes on. You just got one, and then you went and got dressed. I remember Alma Richards. Someone mentioned Alma Richards. He was the biggest man I'd ever seen in my life. And I was in his science class. And the way that he got students to kind of calm down and be quiet, his fingers were about as big around as your wrist. And he would do one of these on the top of your head. And it was almost concussion-like when he would do that. I only saw it happen, never happened to me. On rainy days, those of you that had rainy days in the gym, I remember going upstairs to Mr. Green, and he would show us all the old U.S. Army training films on a rainy day. And boy, we saw some stuff that still, it scares me to death, the things we saw about, well, whatever Army films were about. I remember getting out of Venice High School and not being pants. That was great. I remember in January of 1949, I had come there in September of 48, January of 49, coming out to the front of school, or maybe just getting to school, and some of the cars, the teachers' cars, had driven up to the front of the school, and they had snow on top of their cars. And it had, either they lived in the San Fernando Valley or Burbank or someplace, and it must have snowed that winter because these people came with snow in their cars. And then my grandmother had called me. She lived in Santa Monica, and earlier in the day, they had snow, and it just fell on the ground and melted right away. But I thought that's something, because just this last week, why we've had snow in unexpected areas. When I returned to Venice High School in 1951, I was a little bit more confident, and I'd gone around one time, and I kind of felt good about that. There were many activities that kept me involved. Like many of the people here, I was able to participate, and baseball, football, and track were the areas that I liked. I was also able to be chosen to be an usher, an esquire, a knight. I was in the Letterman's Club. Thank God they didn't have any initiations at that time. I'm not sure I would have survived that. I was honored as a junior to be selected to go to Boys State, and what a wonderful experience that was. The good teachers that I had, and I had a lot of them, but the ones I'd like to just point out, because maybe some of you had them also, Leland LaFond. I think he prepared me more for going to college than any of the instructors that I had at Venice High School. Grayson Turney, one of the great coaches of all time, to be revered as a coach in the LA City school system, and he treated us, every one of his players, as though they were his own sons. And his wife was right along there with him. Bob Barr, Ray Charlson, Earl Wallace, Gladys Hathaway, Walt Thomas. Walt Thomas, he recognized that a lot of the boys at the noon dances had no clue what to do while the girls were out there dancing. And he actually would take time on Fridays in the girls' gym, and he would teach the guys how to dance. That was a lot of fun. Arnold Fletcher, DeWitt Nye, Carl Spring, Emily Tompkins, who was mentioned, administrators, greatest people, at least through my association. Homer Watson was absolutely a blue chip guy. Now, the boys' vice principals, that was different. From the 3 years I was there were 3 different vice principals. J. Cosby Stone, Mr. Dooley, and Mr. Womble. And I'm not sure what it was about boys' vice principals leaving the scene, but Homer Watson was there the entire time, as was Ellen Arciniega. Neat lady. I remember the sock hops and the sports nights and the formal dances. And one of the things that was really great for the kids that were in my class was the opening of the new boys' gym and getting away from that wreck of a gym that we had gone through earlier years. But 1952, September of 52, this beautiful, magnificent site was open for us. And it had heating in the floors. You know, after you took your showers and you came out with cold feet, you had heat in the floors. The basketball floor was huge. There were 3 basketball floors. In the old Venice gym, for those of you that might remember, it only had 3 walls, and one wall was chain link. It was the only basketball court in the city of Los Angeles that a game could actually be fogged out, and they were. Games were fogged out. What would happen? The fog would roll in, and the floor would get wet, and they couldn't play basketball. The field trips, we had great field trips. Ones I remember the most were from Mr. LaFon's class in physiology, and he'd take us down to the slaughterhouse. That was really a big deal. So what would we come back with? Like calves' brains, calf fetus, cow's eyeballs, things like that in order to do physiology kinds of projects. But it was an exciting time. I think probably the lifelong friends that I have made over the years from my time at Venice High School, and still have many of them. We have our own reunion committee, and we meet frequently. And it's just amazing how many people come back. And when we sit down and talk, it's as though all the years have faded away, and some of our conversations are no different than they were when we left school. Some of the things that we did, in fact, Park Lyle is here, and I need to tell him a little bit about John, who was in my class. John and I used to get accused of doing things that were never our fault. But I remember, and maybe you remember things like at 9 o'clock, the pencil drop, or maybe at 11 o'clock, the book drop, or whatever that was. And for some of our teachers, like Mrs. Kirby, she was a dear, dear teacher, but it was so easy to take advantage of her because she had such a loving heart. But we had pencil drops probably once a week. And she would wonder, how in the world did that happen? At any rate, it is really a pleasure to be here sitting with people who really have an indelible imprint on the high school. It has made a difference, who have established a legacy that will never be forgotten. And those of you that are also fellow gondoliers, the same thing. Venice High School has had a major impact on all of our lives. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to be a gondolier. Thank you.
Well, a lovely time was had by all, I think. Thank you all very much. And I do want to just mention that John Quincy Tabor is, as they say, which I hate classifying us, you know, we're all from the same source. But he is the first black lifeguard. And lifeguard, he became a pool lifeguard in 1941 and an ocean lifeguard for our famous ocean lifeguards here in 1942. And the Tabors were the first black graduates from Venice High School. So I want to thank you all. It was a joy. Thank you very much.